they've exerted a lot of effort in certain areas, and so they're going to be the most likely candidate to pull in that information. If they really want to move ahead and serve in that field, they don't even have to know what it is they're serving. But it's that if you could get out of religious thought, they would know, they would have a sense of recognizing that there was knowledge greater than theirs and that they wanted to be useful if it was an appropriate time in letting that knowledge come in to this kingdom level. So certain individuals would, as information is coming down, would tap that information, and then as that information continues to come down, because as it continues to come down, different stratas of it are coming down, and the first strata came down, and a couple of people over here got certain little aspects, and then the next strata came down and got a couple more aspects, and they got a couple more, but only when strata 15 came down was it time that it was okay for them to make a summary out of that and say, that must mean so-and-so. Because believe it or not, 16, by the time 23 gets here, 16 is going to be recognized as being totally off base. But it was right for 16. You see that? Because that's the way it grows. And that's the way information comes in. So, but it's an individual, still everything that he gets, other than his choices, even though he also gets a choice. He even gets the mechanism for choice, and even the mechanism for abuse is given. But the information that he gets is timed. The next level doesn't let things come down out of time. It's ripe for certain things to come in, and the individual, according to the area that he has, his effort and his thirst and his expedient drive, can be more receptive when that comes in. I don't know if that answers you, but what you said, if I understood it right, was you saw how it could work on one side, but not as much on the other, and I don't see any difference. Can you state it differently?
Oh, I guess the control in keeping us from discovering something is not giving them, say, one of the ingredients that they would need to combine to make that discovery. That they control it by withholding a piece, a fact that's needed or something like that. Because the humans still have the ability to combine the facts if they have them, and so the control is not giving them what the facts that they would need.
Well, most of it, I would think, would be all the information been given to them, but it's the ability of the human to be able to put pieces together.
Well, but not all the information's been given to them if the next level doesn't feel like it's time for certain.
The first stage to get them going. Let's use DeLorean, for instance. He's far advanced in my mind, the way he designed his automobile to make it out of stainless steel. And he was picking up on something. Now, his interpretation was to make an automobile, to build an automobile. But he probably didn't get it right when he was to build. And so he's gone through all this suffering. Now this may not be right, but let's
just use it as an example.
Using it as an example. But he's going through all this suffering. He had the world at his fingertips for a while, and then he went from the top to rock bottom. He lost everything. I mean, he's lost everything, including his wife and children. But all he has is his little Bible. And he's clinging to that Bible for dear life. And now, when a man clings, or an individual clings to the Bible, in my mind, he is looking, in a sense, to the next level. Because he reads it and he's trying to find the answer in the Bible. Now, he may not have any purpose. It may be he's just building genius for another lifetime. And let's say another lifetime, he may have something else to build with a kind of unusual type of material, like it was unusual to think of building a car out of stainless steel, right? So all he's doing is preparing for the future. Now, whether or not he makes anything in this life, it doesn't really matter. Because he is preparing for the future, for something. Now, what makes him so great over someone else is that it's the effort that he's exerting to get something. It was obvious that he exerted the effort to bring in some information because of the type of car he built. It was a very modern, advanced automobile.
The beginning, of moving to different textures and different materials.
He didn't go into plastic. He built something that would probably last, wouldn't rust, didn't need cleaning, which was a lot of next level information. But the way he interpreted it was to make an automobile. But that doesn't mean it's wasted. It means that all he's doing is preparing for another lifetime whenever it's time to build something else. Maybe a spacecraft, we don't know. But this is just an example. And you're not looking at something on a one-time basis or for right now. It's prepared right on down the line to other lifetimes.
There's a fallacy in your thinking to think that there's a missing ingredient, that if the ingredient were there, it would be a discovery. That's looking at it from the human point of view, that it's a missing ingredient. It's not a missing ingredient. I mean, in other words, it might be so that if the next level let one more little strata come down, that they would arrive at a place that they'd say, we've got a discovery. In other words, I can make a summation now that says this is this, and this is this, and this is this. But the next level is not holding back that. It's just, it's not time for that. And really the summary is where you're wrong, because that's just something that a human does. He assumes that this is this and this and this, because I can now put all these pieces together and I can call it a theory or a discovery that this now exists. Because then later he's going to learn that all that was wrong. Now, if he's discovering something like, let's say, electricity or the light bulb, and the information is given down about a light bulb, we feel like it. We may be wrong, but it's that the next level didn't say, okay, Benjamin Franklin, you've been such a good boy that we're going to nurture you through this. That instead, it was time for the light bulb to come in. And Benjamin Franklin happened to be one. In other words, it could have, theoretically, from next level theory, there could have been 6 Benjamin Franklin across the globe at the same time who arrived at the same thing on the same day. I can remember back when years ago this vehicle knew someone who was an inventor, and he was always mad because somebody would get their patent in right before his on something that he had just come up with. And as I look back on that, I can wonder how many others there were that were just at the point of patent at the same time. You see what we're saying? So, and it's not that anything was being held back. It's because that's the way the human would look at it. If I just had that one other thing, I could do this thing. But it was just like, what was more important, the information they had prior to what the human would call that last missing ingredient. You see what I'm saying? Those other ingredients might have been just as important from the next level point of view. It wasn't that last ingredient that was so super significant, even though from the human point of view, that last, what they would call the last ingredient, made something else come out. But it was the principles that led up to the last ingredient in the next level's eyes were just as important as what the human would determine, the last ingredient that allowed them to make light bulbs. You see what we're saying? Can you all tune into that?
Now, let's use medicine, for instance. The cure for cancer, there's a cure for cancer. But the medical profession has manipulated it for monetary reasons to prevent a cure from happening.
We feel like the next level has already sent down a cure for cancer.
And it was known back in the 50s. They were beginning to come across it. But because of unorthodox methods, they closed their eyes to it and refused to accept it. Now let's use the more up-to-date thing of AIDS. All of a sudden it's becoming almost like polio was back in the 40s, where it's beginning to kill people. Now it's not only killing the homosexuals, it's killing heterosexual children and hemophiliacs. In other words, it's spreading on to normal people, as we call it. And so therefore they're exerting more effort and they're getting more money to find it. And now they're coming up with, they think, a test where they can test the blood to see if there are any things in the blood that before they give it to someone. But that still isn't the cure for AIDS. All they can do is prevent it from being spread in the bloodstream. But I can guarantee you that very shortly, if as much effort is directed to a cure, and the honest to goodness want a cure, and I don't think that they don't want one because they don't know how it is spread, really. They only think they know, and they're so afraid they'll get it. And it's killing everybody within a matter of a few years, so whoever gets it. So therefore, they want to find a cure. But cancer is different. I don't see the difference myself, but they see the difference because they can pay off yachts and Mercedes and mansions and all like that with the treatment that they give cancer, and they know that cancer isn't contagious. You can't get it through your sexual activity or from drinking from somebody's glass or something like that. But they don't know that about AIDS. So all the effort is being concentrated on this one particular thing in this area. And when that happens, it's just like polio. One man, Dr. Salk, will get all the glory of the vaccine. And hundreds of people probably came up with the vaccine just about the time Dr. Salk did on the polio. And they will say...
He got his postmark soon.
That's right. He just raised his hand faster than the others did. And somebody with AIDS will do the same thing.
But in the meantime, the next level, in other words, it's not because the humans aren't picking up right. The next level probably sent them cancer. If you want to know the facts. In order for them to learn and develop the things that they needed to develop. And all the...
I think, I don't think that they sent it to them. In the sense that they, it's a result of not doing what they were supposed to do. I think they sent them AIDS. I think they sent them measles. I
Yeah.
think they send them all these kind of things because where does the first thing where does the first measles come from? You see what
Oh,
I'm saying?
sure.
Now, cancer occurs due to something happening in the cells of the body, which has to be something that is nutritional. Don't you agree?
And
And
psychological too, destructive to the...
It's a result of doing something harmful.
Well, I'll take back saying that they sent it, but it doesn't mean that it's like exposing it. It's like if it happens, then you will be aware of what you're doing wrong. And in other words, it's not like they wanted it necessarily to not happen, because by its materializing, you are able to correct your ills if you pay close attention. If you do your research right and you make the change. But AIDS, things like AIDS, we know are. I feel like that they haven't sent a cure down. They don't want to send a cure down because they still want the fear of God put in people so much.
Well,
And
the people have to grow. In other words, to receive the answer, which the answer, I feel like the answer's there, but the humans have not, the research people haven't exerted enough effort. And now it's getting frightening to them.
And it's careless lack of restraint, lack of respect for their own bodies, lack of respect for anybody else's body that gets them involved in this. It was the same thing when syphilis was first coming in. It was definitely coming in because of a lack of respect for of their own bodies and lack of respect for others' bodies and lack of restraint. Can you not see that? And of course, they'll let it run a course, and then a cure will come, or what seems to be a cure. Of course, even syphilis now still has stages of reoccurrence. And the only reason Next Level lets things like that happen is because this civilization is in the beginning stages of trying to learn some self-restraint.
We heard on the radio today that this happy hour kissing.
Right. Cocktail hour kissing
Right.
is dangerous.
In other words, you can get colds, you can get herpes, you can get, they named a lot of things. So they recommend if you're going to kiss somebody, kiss them on the cheek.
In other words, I don't know if you know it, but it's such a popular thing when people get together at happy hour or at a cocktail party, that as people come in the door, they kiss on the mouth, and they're just good friends. And
herpes is the rampage now.
And it's now
You're not in unless you have herpes. In other words, they have a group of ones who have herpes. And if you don't have herpes, then it's great not to have it. But they sure don't like it if you have herpes and you give it to the one who doesn't have it. You see, it's like giving them syphilis or something like that, because there's no cure for it. It's really crazy out there. But it's all
necessary. Right.
And I firmly believe the answers are in the ether. Not enough. I can remember way back in the 40s seeing a very rare case of herpes. A very rare case. Only, I can remember they're saying only 5 cases have been documented of muscular dystrophy. That was in the 40s. And all of this has happened in the past 40 years. And it's deterioration. And in other words, it's getting to rock bottom. And now and people are responding right because they're becoming nutritional minded, vitamin minded, health. They want to instead of going and spending their time in the back seat of a car, they'd rather go to a health spa and exercise, build muscle, and get their bodies in good shape, or jog. And in other words, it's changing. The trend is changing. What they call these yippies, you've heard about these yippies? They're even becoming more concerned about money and their status in the world, which I don't know if that's much better, but it's a lot better than something else. What's that? Oh, okay. Can you all see the deterioration? And now it's on the way, on an upward swing, so to speak.
Any other questions?
Any other?
I was wondering if, one of the reasons why we did our part of this test, the way we did was like coming in and coexisting with human minds, is so that we could train, our minds would get trained on getting control of a vehicle that was already developed, already grown, like vehicles that were going to occupy already won't go to the infant stage, instead. And so when we just started cohabitating with this vehicle, it was already grown. It got past the infant stage. And I was wondering if it could be that maybe one reason why we did it in that way. I don't know, it's probably a lot of reasons.
Well, if you'd come in, this might not be right, but a thought occurs to me that if you had come in at the infancy of that vehicle, it wouldn't have made nearly as good effect on the identity genes reprogramming as coming in and working against the programming of the identity. Now, can you follow that? Because when you're fighting and you're winning and you're teaching self-examination, you're teaching restraint, you're teaching overcoming this and changing the way you look at things, and all this in opposition to what the vehicle's programming is. In other words, it's almost like you consciously took on an opponent and you won. And there's a lot more effect, I would think, on the programming that that vehicle's identity will pass on than it would have had it come in infancy. Seems to me it would be a lot more effective. Okay. All set? Well, like we've been doing, we'll raise our voices so that we get a better tape. 2 or 3 things we want to go over with you for a few minutes. One is kind of humorous to us. One of the class members said in one of their notes, when we're making reference to T, said in parentheses, the chief. And T is not the chief, Doe is not the chief. We said one time jokingly that you don't know who the chief is. Chief could even be sitting right here, because we were talking about how the way the next level works, and that and certainly the chief is capable of sending an arm or a finger of his mind into a task like this, but it is inappropriate to think of either one of us in that way. And it makes us very uncomfortable, and we don't want you thinking that way. Okay.
I don't want to give you the impression that we are, because we're not.
Nope. Okay.
Also, some of you said in your slate cleaning notes, when you said something about I failed in this area, or I was weak in this area, and I did this thing again, whatever it was, or I found myself in that circumstance again, after having promised the chief that I would not. None of you, we didn't ask any of you to ever promise the chief that you would not do this or do that again. What did we ask you to promise the chief that you would not do? Sarah Fody? That's right. Let's get that. Does everybody clearly understand that? What you promised was that you would keep things exposed. Now, to us, that meant that you promised that immediately after they occur, you would bring them to your teacher's attention and let us be the receptacle for your keeping those things exposed. And so let's remember that that was the promise you made, was keeping things exposed in that way. Also, a lot of you, or some of you in those notes about slate cleaning, some of you still see the symptoms of your problem as ways that you fall, instead of seeing the problem. In other words, you spent pages and pages in your slate cleaning telling us the depths of what you went through in dealing with the symptoms instead of the problem. Now, we want you to think about that, because some of you still really have difficulty in categorizing and facing the knowing how to reduce to a label or a title or a category the problems that your vehicle has. You can tell us the incidents that are just times when the symptoms have occurred, but you're not seeing the problem. And so this doesn't mean that we did not want the problem when it was said in slate cleaning. A slate cleaning note doesn't do you any good. Now, from now on, we're not slate cleanings. We're going to assume that you are back where you should have been, and that slate cleaning is going to come each time as you promised, as it occurs, because that's what your promise was, that each time you do something that is not next level conduct, that you don't give in to fear of what your teachers might think of you for having done that, or fear of what your teachers might do to you, or thinking, well, it's my problem, so I'll keep it to myself. You're going to just simply follow the procedure of sharing with your teachers that you have recognized that here again you have slipped in an area that is not next level conduct, and doing it as quickly and as clearly. It does not do, you shouldn't, when you're doing it, say, be so vague as to say, I slipped and had a physical moment of weakness. Do you follow that? That doesn't tell us anything. Or say that I slipped and was very aggressive in the lab. Now, that doesn't tell us anything. If you're going to tell us about the incident that you slipped, then tell us what the incident was. Get right down to it. tell it blatantly, openly, and get rid of it. Don't waller in it. Don't tell all the things that led up to it necessarily, or the reasons why, or my vehicle must have really been conning me for the weeks prior, and I went through this and this and this and this, and it led up to this. I just say I recognize that this occurred, and say what this was, right in simple, direct terms. Don't make it any worse or any better than it was. Just be clear about it. Did Ligotti?
Well, not sure I understand it. These times before, when we had slipped, we wrote a slippage note. Are you saying this is different now?
No.
These go direct to you?
No. Now, it is true that the slippage note things are exactly the same. Exactly the same. In fact, slippage notes are one way of keeping your slate clean. But there are certain areas that we have kept out of slippage notes. But some of you have not even brought to slippage notes or to help wanted meetings areas that should have been brought there. You have hidden them not only from links, but from the class as well, because you didn't want your vehicle to be embarrassed, or you didn't want to have to deal with that openly. Don't forget that so that hasn't changed. The point is, slippage notes have not changed, nor the areas that were to come directly to links. That is just the same.
Well, for example, like in the slippage note, if a person had a full response to an individual, that's pretty much what would be said.
Okay, but if
the details
that's
of
right.
who it was and so forth.
Okay, but if it was rather severe and it was conduct unbecoming a member of the next level, what should you do with it?
Well, then that
January?
would go directly to links.
How? Yes, suspected strike. Don't forget that suspected strike is still the best way that all this stuff comes direct and brief and to the point, and is letting. Now, even suspected strike areas, that does not mean that they are exempt from slippage meetings. Only areas that we have said should not be brought up at help wanted meetings. Do you understand that?
You're talking about suspected strikes, I guess, that would be that I would be writing
Yes,
about myself.
About myself. In other words, that's right.
As a witness.
I'm glad you brought that up. It's only suspected, which we have said clearly that 2/3 or better, if not all, of your suspected strike notes would be of yourself instead of others. And those of yourself are certainly, except for certain areas that we have said to keep private between your teachers, all other areas of even those suspected strike notes on yourself should be brought up at help wanted meetings. Just because you're writing suspected strike about yourself is not a way to keep it out of help wanted meetings. It always does you good if you force your vehicle to bring its poison to the surface. And nobody in the class is going to think the worse of you. Nobody's going to spank you. You don't have to go through a hazing lineup. You don't have to be taken off of desserts. You don't. There's nothing that happens. You just. One of the biggest difficulties that you're having with your vehicles is your vehicle's not wanting exposure of things that the vehicle got its way in. Because when that's exposed, it makes the vehicle look very bad. And therefore, the vehicle will fight to the end to not have it exposed. But by now, you should prove to your classmates as well as your teachers that you have enough control of your vehicle to have no hesitation about exposing an incident where you lost control. And the quicker you expose the vehicle and its loss of control, the less strength the vehicle has. The more strength you have over the vehicle. And here again, you've got to stay up. You've got to have an overview that when you see that those things happen, you can't give in to thinking in human terms of embarrassment. Or I've brought this up so many times that if I bring it up again, it'll sound to my class or to my teachers that I'm just not trying, or that I must not want to conquer this area, that I'm not really working on it. I'm just bringing it up repeatedly. Now, we're talking about things more significant than chewing your fingernails. Do you follow that? And some of the notes we got even on cleaning slate were just about as insignificant as chewing your fingernails, even though to you they have some importance because you're trying to conquer the little habits of the vehicle. But the thing that's strange is that there were some areas with some individuals that that this slate cleaning note was a perfect opportunity for those individuals to zero in on the real problems they have with their vehicle and lay them on the table, finally accepting what the main characteristic of the illnesses of the vehicle are, seeing them and just objectively saying, here they are, and it's still sick in this way, but I'm giving it shots all the time, hoping to get the allergy under control as quickly as I can, instead of just saying the symptoms. But individuals would list the little things about the level of biting my fingernails, and miss the big ones. Miss, in some cases, not in many cases, but in some cases. Did everyone write a slate cleaning note?
I did write one. Melody.
I thought there were one or two
Study,
others.
did you write one?
Slate cleaning. I thought there was one other. Oh, that are in the notes tonight? Oh.
Okay.
Then that would clarify that. None of you are exempt from realizing I can't imagine missing an opportunity when your class was writing slate cleaning of not re-expressing to your teachers at that time your awareness of the major human characteristics that you're dealing with that your vehicle has. And none of you are exempt. All of you have lowly human vehicles by the nature of this period in civilization and their weakness and their lack of experience and lack of knowledge and lack of nutrition and so forth and so on and so on. None of you have vehicles that don't have a number of serious problems. And it isn't even, and to say that is not, we don't want to talk to the vehicles. We want to talk to the next level minds. If we're talking next level minds, to say that is not putting anyone down any more than it is to say, can I help you with that wart you have on your finger, or that crooked nose, or that something else. In other words, it doesn't have to be personal. You've got to get out of the personal relationship of the deficiencies of the vehicle. See them for what they are objectively and apply the Band-Aids that we give you to apply. Apply them repeatedly if necessary. Get bigger Band-Aids if necessary, and put iodine on them if necessary, if it's required, in order to try to get more and more control over the difficulties of the vehicle. But actually, it's more important, if you had to think in terms of one being more important, it's more important that your slate be kept clean than an area be conquered once and for all. It's actually more important. Not that we have to think in those terms, because it's important that you work desperately to override the weaknesses and deficiencies of the vehicle, because that's really what you're doing more than overcoming them. Because your vehicle isn't going to overcome them, because you couldn't stay here long enough generations for it. But you can override them. That's what you're attempting to do, is override them. Do you understand that? And when you override them, you're simply seeing them for what they are. You've gotten clever enough to learn how to dart around them, or to learn the tricks that we have taught you on avoiding the problems of the vehicle. And if you try to apply those to the best of your ability and they didn't work, it's just it's part of the routine of this experience to say, here's an area, once again, that I have tried, and I must not have yet learned how to apply the effort that is required in that area, or my strategy isn't on target yet, and I'm going to keep after it until my strategy gets on target. Does everybody understand that? Stand with it? Well, let's say that I'm bringing up in that I want Lynx to know that I'm okay. For example, the other day in the lab, so-and-so said such and such to me, and I just couldn't get control of it, and so I said such and such, and then they said such and such, and that's all symptomatic. Now, what would be the proper approach would be to say, I'm afraid that this problem that my vehicle has of speaking before it thinks and letting hostility come out, or letting some sarcasm come out, came out again and I failed to nip it in the bud. The circumstance was with so-and-so, and I regret it. And I said such and such. Now, you don't need to give all the lead in and the lead out. You just needed to say what you said and see the problem. The problem was not having control over the illness of the tongue and its sarcasm getting ahead of the next level mind's control. It was improper to say, so-and-so said such and such, and then I said such and such, and they said such and such. That's just all symptomatic to the problem. It's not saying, once again, I am faced in recognizing that this problem I have with sarcasm, or my tongue before engaging next level mind, once again it was blatantly pointed out to me when I said such and such to so-and-so, period. You see what we're saying? And that's how direct you want to get in your thinking. Was there one other item in that regard? Okay. The last time we met, there were a couple of things that we brought up that were also very important to the ingredients of building your new vehicle's computer. What's one of those? Dear Lodi?
Well, primarily it was not allow the brain of the vehicle to evaluate its growth in its own terms, looking at performance on a task or that type of thing, as building the next level mind.
That's part of it. What Lagodi?
Well, one of the things I can remember is taking or listening, being exact when an older member speaks. Is, in other words, don't evaluate and put in your own summation or thoughts of what he said, rather than, in other words, that's what he's trying to say.
I think so.
Get it exact. word for
Okay.
word.
Right, and not letting the vehicle do the coloring. Is that what you're talking about? What else? Dan Sony?
Not being hurt.
Huh? Not being hurt. There was another area that we made an issue of. Lagodi?
Well, one of them was being responsible, and this is know what's going on in your task as well as the general.
Right, when we were talking about SAT 3 and not knowing. Okay, that's study.
This might be hard to sleep. I put attached to sleep and talking about secrecy and dishonesty.
Well, we certainly pointed out that the importance of how dangerous it is. To your own development of your new vehicle. If you let poison of deceit or dishonesty did you do so and so, and you say, no, I didn't, but you know you did. And so the next thing that you do in order to correct it is to say, I can't believe I said, no, I didn't, because I did. And my vehicle just didn't want to let me face the fact that I did. Now, that's one kind.